Whether it's ingenious level design or terrible level design, we can all think of a few game levels that just confuse the crap out of us. I'm Falcon, and today on gameranx, here's 10 game levels we all got lost in. Number 10, Tomb Raider Gold, the Atlantean Stronghold. So part of the reason why this level is just impossible, that is to say if you don't take the shortcut, is that it's one of those levels where everything just looks absolutely the same. So it's pretty easy to lose track of where you are, and the lava challenges themselves are, well, let's just go ahead and say, quite the thing. Also, one of the big things about Tomb Raider Gold was that it was just an expansion pack on the original Tomb Raider, which had not quite honed the controls to perfection. The later Tomb Raider games really had the controls a lot more on lockdown, also the physics and a lot of the other issues. I mean, in all seriousness, it was one of the first 3D games, and some of that stuff contributed to this level's difficulty as well. It was easy to get stuck there because, well, it was kind of a completely new thing. It was kind of an unavoidable problem as they were blazing a trail, and it's understandable, but going back to it now is just, I mean, take the shortcut. Take the shortcut. Number 9 was Planescape Torment's Modern Maze, which was not only difficult to even get into, but the only procedurally generated area in any game ever made in the Infinity engine. So it's not just unique in Planescape Torment, but in all of Planescape Torment's cousins and offspring as well. And yeah, there were kinda ways to get around that a little. It was still a totally randomly generated dungeon in a game that in no way were you expected to be used to that sort of thing playing. Let's just go ahead and say it, Planescape Torment can actually be a pretty tough game anyhow, when you know where you're going. Number 8, the Thieves' Maze in Baldur's Gate, which looked unassuming enough, but provided enough challenge and disoriented you enough just to the point where you weren't really sure what to do. On top of that, there's the Baldur's Gate pathfinding, which was not super great. It's a great game, but, well, AI characters didn't always do what they should have done, let's just say. And in a maze, you kind of want everybody to at least try. I'm sure I'm not alone when I bring up the pathfinding and the Thieves' Maze. It would be tough enough on its own without the pathfinding issues, just because it's so easy to get disoriented and everything looks exactly the same. It was late in the game, so they made sure it was definitely as hard as it could be, and if you ever wanted to get through the Undercity, it was a necessity. Number 7, Dark Souls, The Depths. Like a lot of places in Dark Souls, The Depths doesn't really have a lot of identifying areas. You're not ever really completely sure whether or not you've been where you are or not, and on top of that, basically every enemy there can give you poison, or curse for that matter. It's a long area that you have to take your time doing, you can't rush. And I mean that relative to Dark Souls. I don't mean that as in every area in Dark Souls you can't rush. I mean for Dark Souls, you have to take your time. And it can be very, very difficult to do that. It's easy to run out of patience. Number 6, Vivek City in Morrowind, which is a city that wasn't even actually designed to be a maze of any sort, but well, in effect, it's a maze. It's basically a fairly large city built on a bunch of different islands that don't really provide a lot of landmarks again. One of the big problems with this city is that it looks like the background of a Sonic level, as in a lot of the levels are very geometrical and very similar. Number 5 is the Woodside Apartments of Silent Hill 2, which is a series of rooms that you have to use a map to navigate around because everything looks completely identical. It's intentionally completely identical too. It's not because of the limitations of the game, it's actually part of the scary effect of this part of the game. It's an apartment building too, when apartment buildings are built that way. It lulls you into a sense of familiarity and then switches things up on you randomly, but that doesn't really help much for navigation purposes. It's just for, giving you something to have to deal with. And frankly, it's disorienting. This example, though, in a good way, disorienting. Number 4 is the final area of Monkey Island 2, where you're trapped in an abandoned theme park. There's various different areas and you just have to try to avoid LeChuck the whole time. But the first little while you basically can't. That first couple of rooms, it's literally you just don't know what to do. You're like, you can't get out of here. You can't get rid of this guy. And you're like, what am I doing wrong? I don't understand what I'm doing wrong. And a lot of people just give up. Number 3 is Blight Town in Dark Souls. It has the same problem as the other Dark Souls area we mentioned, the Depths. There's not really a lot of landmarks. Things kind of look similar, but this one has the added disadvantage of swarming anybody who stands still with enemies. Oh, enemies. You can't stay still at all, and that's, if you need to think, you still have to keep moving. It's standing still is bad. You can't stand still here. It's one of those areas where like, just let me stop and collect my thoughts. You think that the whole time, but every time you do, you just get attacked. It's a bad idea to stop there. Number 2 is Halo Combat Evolved's Library, which, hey, if you really like hallways and big rooms that look exactly like the last big room, is probably a pretty enjoyable level. If you don't like those things, though, it's kind of a nightmare, because there's kind of a lot of it. It literally seems like the level was copy-pasted together like, oh, this wasn't long enough yet, better add another hallway. And it's not even that you would get stuck on it. I mean, if you put it on Legendary, you're not exactly going to get through it. It's a long level with a lot of tough attacks in it. But it's one of those levels where you're just like, is it done yet? Every minute you spend in this level, it feels like you're stuck in this level. You feel lost the whole time. Am I backtracking? This looks exactly like where I came from. Well, it's probably because it's generic the whole way through, and frankly, they probably just built it SimCity style, which is definitely not an appealing way to make first-person shooter levels. And finally, number 1 is The Lost Woods in The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. The Lost Woods still confuses me, quite frankly. The way you get through is by following the music, and if I were to tell you that I had that figured out ahead of making this, I'd be lying. I was like 13, 14 years old when Ocarina of Time came out, and I really didn't understand it. There's a combination of directions that you can follow, but it's extremely disorienting. And really the best way to figure it out, if you can't memorize that combination of directions, is to just walk partly through each of the stumps. And if it turns into the next area, keep going. If it stays black, don't. And let me say that that area still frustrates me. I technically know how to get through it now, but once I'm in there, I'm just like, ugh, this. It's an anxiety inducer. What was a level you got lost in? It can be any of them from this list or any others that you can remember off the top of your head. And if you like this video, make sure you click like. If you're not already subscribed, you should do that. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. My name is Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at FalconTheHero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.